All right, everybody, I am fresh off of watching Sonic Prime Season 1. Just binge watched the entire thing, and we're going to get into a full-blown review of the first season, everything you need to know, and we're going to talk about things that I like and things that I don't like. So let's not waste your time. Let's get right into the clip. So Sonic Prime is, right off the bat, it is a very good show, but there is some things that I don't like about the show. Like, I do not think this is a perfect Netflix show. To start off, just to get things out of the way, I think that the voice cast was pretty solid. I don't really like Tails' voice that much. Everyone else really doesn't bother me. I think Devin Mack is obviously the star of the show. Like, he does a really good job as Sonic. It gives me like real Ryan Drummond vibes, but a little bit of Roger. But I'd say he's more Adventure Sonic as opposed to Roger Craig Smith Sonic, which personally to me is a good thing. The two most notable voices, like I said, are Sonic, but also Eggman. Brian Drummond does a pretty decent job at Eggman. It's definitely not Mike Pollock. I think he is trying his best like Eggman interpretation or Mike Pollock interpretation. So it's definitely not bad, but I don't find myself like falling in love with it. I think it's, you know, it's okay. I think he does a pretty good job considering we haven't seen a new Eggman in a very long time. It's probably something we have to get used to, but he does have a similar like approach to the voice. I like Rouge's voice. I like Amy's voice, and Knuckles is okay. He's kind of just like there. I feel like his voice is kind of similar to the current VA, so I don't really have problems with that either. I also like Shadow for the most part. He doesn't have this like overly like raspy edginess to his voice like the current VA, and that's no disrespect to him. But personally, I do like this one a little bit better, but we didn't really hear that much of Shadow. Like I said, the biggest highlight is definitely Devin Mack as Sonic. He really captures that like youthful, energetic spirit of Sonic and cockiness. We'll get into like a final review later, but I guess we could start off with like the plot and kind of how things develop in the show. So Sonic starts off in New York City. At first I thought it was New York City, but you know, he's in this like dystopian reality where he never existed. You know, you walk into the show and you're kind of confused with like what is happening, and this is kind of where they start like going crazy on the flashbacks. You know, you kind of see like all the events leading up to it, although this kind of stretches out over the next couple episodes. One major theme of the show is definitely flashbacks. So yeah, Sonic is in this dystopian reality, and it cuts back to the original timeline where we kind of get to the battle with Eggman and how he got the Paradox Prism. Sonic and all of his friends are fighting, but you notice that Sonic's friends are actually upset with him because he was late. And this is once again kind of a common theme of the show where they talk about how Sonic really didn't appreciate his friends, even though it seems like all he does is care about his friends. So I feel like that's a little bit conflicting, but he attacks Eggman, they shatter the Paradox Prism, and then we kind of actually see how Sonic got into New York City. We see some fighting scenes, some really good action, by the way. That's one thing I really do like about the show. I feel like the animation and action is really good. Like, for all the concerns that people had about this show, especially like compared to that like Mega Man show that WildBrain did, I would say that the animation looks very good. Like, it's a very good looking show. So long story short, Sonic's running around, he fights Dr. Babbles, he escapes from him, and then he actually meets Nine, who is Tails, but in an alternate reality when he does not know Sonic. After a little bit of a scuffle, and I will say I do like Nine, I feel like he is a good character. I feel like he makes Tails a lot cooler than he actually is, or actually was, you know, over the last couple years. So after they fight, they go into like a little bit of a flashback, and then Nine kind of feels sympathetic towards Sonic, or at least wants to know more about him. Also, his gloves and shoes are like radiating energy. Nine is able to like harness that power and make it mold to whatever world that Sonic's in. They give him some new drip. I love the new drip, by the way. They get captured by the Chaos Council, and then Sonic is trapped, and basically they put him to the test to see what his power is all about. It's very similar to the power that energizes the city. After Sonic goes to the test, he radiates so much energy, he goes back into the Shadowverse for a second where we see a glimpse of Shadow, and then it goes to the next episode. There's a lot of mystery surrounding Shadow in the show, which I would like to see more of because we really did not get to see much of Shadow in season 1. That's one nitpick that I have with the show. So it goes to the next episode. We get a little bit more backstory via flashbacks, and then that's when Knuckles and Rouge, who, you know, previously in the episode they explained how they team up together, they break Sonic out. Sonic fights Eggman, and Rusty Rose actually joins them for a second. They all team up, and then long story short, Sonic finds the Paradox Prism. He transports into a brand new world. This is the Jungle World, and this is where it kind of gets a little, you know, it kind of deviates from the main plot, but I'm sure there's like different reasons as to why it's important. So we see a little bit of the Jungle World and kind of how it's different versions of the characters, which is also another nitpick that I have with the show. In the Jungle World, Amy is the monster, Knuckles, Rouge, Tails, and Big the Cat are on the same team, and they're in this world where like the grass is overgrown. It's, you know, it's interesting, it's cool. But this is where we kind of see some parts of like where friendship and stuff like that is a central theme of the show, because Sonic is trying to make everybody friends with each other, but they literally hate each other because of the resources on the island. Long story short, we see more flashbacks to kind of piece together the narrative a little bit, and the significance of the tree in the show. The tree is very significant because I guess it signifies Sonic's friendship with his friends, the memories that they made, and the tree is actually central in the Jungle World as well as New York City. And it shows that Sonic did take his friends for granted. So after Monster Amy finds the Paradox Prism or whatever, they fight, blah, blah, blah. It's a long story short. Eventually, everybody makes up, they find the shard, and Sonic transports back to New York City, and then once again, we see Shadow at the end of episode 5. Episode 6, back in New York City, we're fighting Eggman, and then 9 shows up because he learned how to harness the energy of the prism. Rusty Rose is back with the Egg Council. She's been reprogrammed. And once again, a central theme comes back. Sonic's friends think that he abandoned them. Knuckles and Rouge are mad, and Tails is mad because he went into a different Shadowverse. 9 actually shows Sonic the Shadowverse, and we get to see the future, which has nothing in it, which I think is foreshadowing for what could come in future episodes. I feel like whatever final battle takes place, it will take place in that future. But yeah, basically, 9 gets kidnapped with the Paradox Prism, and that's kind of how the episode ends. The Egg Council gets the Paradox Prism. Episode 7, we see more of Shadow's backstory. He uses Chaos Control right as the Paradox Prism is shattering the world, so I think that's how Shadow was able to forego being trapped in like the Shadowverses and being a different version of himself, because Shadow is lurking around in every episode. You see like a little glimpse of him, but we don't get to see the full plot of Shadow, which is one thing, once again, I would like to see more of, but like I said, it's gonna be 8 episodes at a time, so I think that's how they're gonna do it. Sonic is running through New York City. Shadow tells him to keep going, and then Sonic ends up in the pirate world. We get to see a little bit of backstory about this world, but it's not really too crazy. Sonic becomes the pirate of the ship after Knuckles, aka Dread, was actually the pirate captain or whatever, and we get a plot twist at the end of this episode because now it starts to get real. Rusty Rose and the Eggman robots from New York City show up in the pirate world, which means that they learned how to use the Paradox Prism, so the stakes are starting to rise a little bit. Long story short, after the end of episode 8, we see that Sonic and friends team up. They defeat Rusty Rose. Pirate Knuckles gets the Paradox Prism. Very good scene pursues where Sonic actually runs to get him. Kind of reminds me of Sonic Movie 2. He rescues Knuckles, but then he touches the Paradox Prism. He goes into the Shadowverse, and then we see Shadow once again being an edgelord trying to fight Sonic because he told him that he ruined the world and that the world doesn't exist. Plot definitely thickened. All right, and yeah, so that's the plot of the show, and like I said, I think it ends off on a very good note and definitely has me excited for season 2 and season 3, although it felt like that wasn't really much of a season, you know what I mean? I think that's how Netflix does it though. They release a couple episodes at a time, you binge watch it, and then you just wait for the next season. It turns out that Ian Flynn was actually a consultant for the story, which a famous meme right now in the Sonic community kind of maybe explains the flashbacks, I don't know. But yeah, let's get into my thoughts on the show. I think the show was very good. Like, I definitely enjoyed it. You know, it really felt cool to see like Sonic animated in that way. Like 3D modern Sonic was live on TV. This was the first time basically this has ever happened. This is the first time modern Sonic, if you will, has been on a TV show since Sonic X. Sonic Boom is a completely different vibe than this show. I would say this show definitely goes for more of the Sonic X vibe as opposed to the Sonic Boom vibe, which personally I like. Although Sonic Boom is a good show in its own right, it's just very different. It's good to see that there's a central underlying theme of this show as opposed to episode that doesn't really interconnect to each other. So I like that there's continuity between the plot, and as it goes on, the stakes elevate. Like I said, I love the animation, I love the fight scenes, I love the characters. I think all the characters, including Sonic's friends in particular, are done justice. Tails really has like a stronger sense of identity and place of belonging in the group, and I feel like every interpretation of him is pretty good. He's not really like a shy, quiet guy, except, I mean, 9 is kind of like a misfit, but he's very much capable in his own right. He almost beats Sonic, so that was pretty cool. Amy's a pretty good character as well, although I will say it's kind of interesting that Rusty Rose, as of right now, is one of the main antagonists of the show. I think Rouge is very good. All of her interpretations are actually very good. She seems very smart, probably the smartest of the bunch. I will say that she's probably the most like cunning and intelligent one out of everyone in the group. Like, it seems like she's the leader in some of the scenarios, like in the jungle world. So yeah, I think she's a good character. As far as Knuckles goes, I think he's very like just there, you know what I mean? I don't think he really overexerts himself. It's good to see that he's still like strong and powerful, and he still has crazy fighting abilities, which is good to see. But I feel like he kind of takes a little bit of a backseat role compared to other characters. But overall, Knuckles is a good character in the show. And Big the Cat, we don't really get to see much of him or really much of what his role is. I mean, he's in some of the Shadowverses, but for the most part, he's kind of just there, you know. I think more so for comedic relief. And Shadow also seems to be handled pretty well so far. He's obviously somewhat of an edgelord, but I don't get total edginess for no reason vibes from him. I feel like he's genuinely upset that Sonic like almost destroyed the world, so he's like not fond of Sonic's like childish antics, but he has a reason for that, as you know, the whole universe gets shattered and basically nothing exists. So he definitely feels that way for a reason, but we don't get enough of him in the show, so I would like to see more as more episodes progress, and that's one thing that the show does well. It makes you want to watch more. So the characters are handled well. Now, one thing I actually think is one of the weaker parts is actually Sonic. There's flashes, right? It's either like he's a little bit more closer to movie Sonic in terms of like the goofiness and how naive he can be at times, as opposed to like Frontier Sonic, which is a lot more somber and serious. There's many times throughout the show where I feel like he's not at his true potential. Like sometimes he goes off and defeats like 20 robots, and then other times he's getting destroyed by these robots. He's getting destroyed by Rusty Rose. He's losing to Dr. Babbles at first. When he fights Amy in the jungle universe, he's also getting beat up. Like, I feel like Sonic gets beat up a lot in this show, even though he's the main character, and this takes place sometime later in the game's canon. Assuming that this is canon, probably after Frontiers, if that is the case, unless Frontiers happens in an alternate dimension. But, you know, Sonic is like well tested and a seasoned like hero, so at this point, why is he getting beat up by some of his allies who are more so taking a backseat to him? So I don't really like that. And I will say, while there's some good moments, like at the end of episode 2, where he kind of realizes like, hey, I took my friends for granted. Like, I'm the one that caused the universe to disrupt. Like, he's always trying to save his friends. Like, you have that aspect, which is good, and he gets serious in those moments. But other moments, like, he is very goofy, borderline like corny. When he plops in episode 1, he's like, wow, that was Sonic Boom of a headache. I found myself more times than not kind of rolling my eyes at some of the stuff that he said. I'm like, yo, he's almost a little too goofy, and I would say like not as smart as he's supposed to be. Not that Sonic is like a genius. I feel like Sonic gets dumbed down a little bit. So that's one like major gripe that I have with the show. I think Sonic could be interpreted better. While it's not terrible, I think it's better than the meta era, but I do see some meta era in him. But I think this is a journey of self-discovery, and like I said, we only got 8 episodes, and really, like, if you want to get technical, probably like 4 real episodes, because the episodes are pretty short, so there's still a lot of plot to develop. So I'm sure the character development of Sonic is something that's going to improve. I will say though, I'm very interested in the underlying plot of the show. I feel like as it goes on, it gets a little bit better in some of the episodes. Like episode 1, I found it to be kind of slow. I'm like, all these flashbacks and stuff like that. To be honest, I would have preferred the first episode to be all the flashbacks to give us the proper backstory and context that we need, so we can kind of like get away from some of the flashbacks in the middle of the episodes. Because I really like, one thing I really wanted to see with this show is just like the modern cast interpreted as themselves. One problem is that it's a different version of each character as you go into each different universe, so it's hard to build that connection with them. But you do though, you do sympathize with them, you do build that connection, especially for the characters in New York City, because you get to see them for a couple episodes. So like the jungle characters, you know, you get to know them for a little bit and then you move on. Pirate characters, you get to know them for a little bit and then you move on. But you do build a good connection with them. But like I said, I wish the first episode was the full backstory. I would have liked to just seen just one episode in modern Green Hill with the modern cast to give us that context. But back to what I was saying, yeah, the first episode moves kind of slow, but then it picks up towards the end. I like to see more of like the central plot with the Paradox Prison, because it feels like New York City, I guess, is like the main like world. I guess the Chaos Council will be the underlying villain of the show. So there's some episodes where like when you're in the jungle, when you're in the pirate scene, it does take a little bit of a backseat because you're focused on the individual plot line there, which kind of moves on once you go from episode to episode. But every time the main plot advances, it was always something good. And seeing these constant appearances of Shadow has me wanting more. I'm like, I want more of this show. It sucks that this is how Netflix releases their shows. They do it like a couple episodes at a time. They do this with every show. And of course, every episode, no matter what, ends in a cliffhanger. I just really want to see more of what happens, and I'm really pleased with how the underlying plot is progressing, because I think it's about to get real. Now that Sonic and Shadow are about to fight in the Shadowverse, I guess it's about to get crazy. I don't know why Shadow's fighting him. Shouldn't they be working together? But I guess that's what's going to happen. They're going to eventually work together and hopefully team up, and we'll see a little bit more of Shadow, because another criticism I have of the show is that a fan favorite character, Shadow, we don't get to see enough of him. I've always been kind of a critic of the multiverse stuff. Like I said, I would like to see a little bit more Sonic X, which is the modern, faithful interpretation of the characters as we know them in the games. And this show, we're basically getting almost brand new characters at this point. The silver lining is that these characters are written well, and they're definitely intriguing and interesting, but it's still not Amy, Tails, Knuckles, Rouge, and Big the Cat. It's, you know, Nine. It's Dread Nux. It's like these different versions of the characters. It's Thorn Rose. It's Rusty Rose. So they're different, but I do like the characters for what it's worth. That's one thing I also don't like about the show, the whole different universe thing. And sometimes when you're in these Shadowverses, while it's good for Sonic's self-discovery and it kind of helps advance his character a little bit, at the end of the day, I do feel like it's detracting from the main plot just slightly. So that's another like small nitpick or criticism that I have of the show. Overall though, I would say the show is solid. I do like it. Like I said, the animation looks awesome. All the fight scenes are really good. Like one of my favorite ones is the slow-mo scene in episode 3. I like in episode 1 the test scene where Sonic's kind of like fighting and there's like a lot of Easter eggs and stuff like that in front of the Chaos Council. I like the fight scene between Sonic and Shadow. Like there's a lot of things that I do like about the show, but like I said, it's not perfect. This is not the best Sonic he's ever been. Although he's good. Like he's not like terribly offensive, but some of those jokes and some of those quips, I'm like, bro, this is so corny. I'm like cringing. It's so corny. But the plot is definitely good. You know what I'm saying? Like as it progresses, as you get to like episode 6 where the Chaos Council learns how to transport between worlds and they kidnap Nine, that's like, yo, this is about to get real. So I definitely like that. And another thing I don't like actually is some of the cliffhangers too. Like the cliffhangers will be like mid-combat scene. It's like there's ways to make cliffhangers good, but mid-combat scene, it's like, dude, what the heck? At least we get to binge watch the whole episode. But once again, even the Sonic and Shadow fight at the end of episode 8 ends in a cliffhanger mid-combat. It's like, bro, why are there cliffhangers in the middle of combat? It should be during like a dialogue scene where something crazy is revealed, like most Netflix shows. So what are my final thoughts on the show? I think I give it a 7 out of 10. I'm definitely intrigued by the plot and I definitely want to see more of the show, but there's definitely some things that bring it down, and I can see the show not being for everyone. I still think at this current point in time, I think Sonic X still might be my personal favorite. I don't know if this is nostalgia speaking, but Sonic X, I know it didn't age well in terms of animation quality, which this show has really great animation quality. It just really felt good to see like those characters interpreted as their modern selves, which is just something that is, I guess, a me thing as opposed to like, you know, a real diehard like movie TV show critic, because I am not that. I'm just a guy with a green screen, a camera, and a mic, you know what I mean? So I would recommend this show to any Sonic fan. I think there's a lot of good, faithful source material stuff in there. You know, we got the Spin Dash, we got modern Sonic, we got all the modern characters, Green Hill and stuff like that. In terms of just like the action alone, like the action alone is very good. Like all the action scenes are really cool. There's a lot of things to like, but as a longtime Sonic fan, there's certainly some things that you can nitpick about the show. So yeah, like I said, I give it a 7 out of 10. It's good, but it's not perfect. But we're talking about the first 8 episodes that's setting it up, and I feel like they intentionally cut some of these episodes short, because I don't think it's 8 episodes. I think some of these episodes could be combined into one, and it's really like 4 like long episodes, you know what I mean? So there's a lot of stuff to discover, a lot of stuff to figure out. We're set up very nicely for the next couple of episodes. There's definitely a lot of room for improvement because we're going to see more with the plot. Like I want to figure out what happens to all the old characters, what happens to Eggman, what happens with Sonic and Shadow. There's a lot to look forward to. Like right now, like I said, I'm at like a 7.5, but the ceiling is definitely higher depending on how they take it with the plot. But let me know what you guys think about it down below in the comments.